Welcome, everyone, to the Sync Your Life podcast. In today's episode, I'm diving deep with one of my Sync course members, Kristina Watkins. She's been one of my, I think, founding members of the Sync course. She was one of the first people to hop into this when I launched the beta back in 2020. She's been an ever-present member in the associated Facebook group, and I love hearing her progress. She's always very willing to chime in and ask questions. She's always in the group supporting others, and of course, raised her hand to be a little guinea pig for me today on the podcast for me to interview her just about her journey with hormone health and where she is today, as opposed to where she started in 2020. So first and foremost, Kristina, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jenny. Good to be here.
Yeah. So Kristina, I want you to tell everybody just a little bit about yourself so that people listening can get a feel for who you are.
Okay. So my name's Kristina. I'm 41 years old now, hit that 40 over COVID. And I have two kids. They're 8 and 11, and I'm married. So I work full-time. I teach full-time at the University of Indianapolis in the School of Occupational Therapy, and do a little bit of clinic work with pediatric clients through Community Health Network. So that all keeps me busy, of course, but then the two kids on top of that. So.
Oh yeah, I think the two kids are in itself will probably keep you busy. I understand.
For sure.
Understand. It's funny. We do have a few resident occupational therapists in our Sync group, so it's been really cool. Actually, several of you guys were in the beta initially, and so it was really cool to have you guys who are already. I feel like OTs are obviously very in tune with the body. And, you know, they have great proprioception of their body and they understand how they're feeling on a physical level. So I feel like you guys kind of took the course to the next level, even in the very beginning, because you were able to kind of correlate, right? Like different ways that you're feeling with different things in the body. So that's really cool. So, okay. So I want people to hear from you, you know, when was the last time you were feeling your best and when did things start to kind of go awry?
Okay. Yeah, I would say, you know, it feels like it coincided with COVID. And so you started kind of thinking, is it just COVID? Is it just that I'm stuck at home or what is this? But I don't recall necessarily hitting a wall where I really truly felt just bad. But I definitely hit a wall where it was the normal things that I used to do to lose weight or to stay, just even maintain a good weight, or to feel healthy. All of those things just weren't working anymore. You know, I could do the 21-day fix, or I could start a new workout program and I would feel the change and feel better. And instead I started just gaining and gaining and gaining and it just seemed to not be able to stop. And so, of course, you know, you make all the excuses of, well, you know, you're just being lazy or you're not doing enough or whatever, you know, you're stuck at home, you're drinking too much wine, you know, what is it? Right. And so it just started almost derailing even like my mental health, right? Like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I get this together? Why can't I find my motivation? Why can't I keep determined and stay on track, and you know what's going on? And so I would say that really happened in the last 2 to 3 years. You know, I went from kind of being at what I considered healthy to gaining, you know, almost 30 pounds, and it just was like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah, I think I remember like when you had originally reached out, it was like, I think I just need more, like, and I hear this a lot from women, I need more motivation or I need more, you know, accountability to keep me going. And in reality, when we dug a little deeper, it was like, no, I actually feel a little bit off. Right. So tell us, like when COVID happened and things started feeling off, when you say off, what do you mean? Like what types of symptoms were you feeling and how was your energy overall?
Yeah, that would be it. I mean, I think I felt that low energy, definitely the brain fog, you know, so days, even, you know, now on the flip side, I still have days that I'm tired, maybe I didn't sleep as well or whatever, but that brain fog is really gone. So just that sense of feeling like I couldn't get it together, you know, I was like, I can't think straight. The irritability, which again, I think sometimes we chalk up to just being a woman who's on her period or what the heck's going on, right? So I was really irritable. We'll call it low libido, but it was basically non-existent for me. And I just, so then, you know, you feel like, I don't know, you feel unattractive, you feel all of those things that we do, right? So it was all of those. I mean, I call it like, it felt like little things to me, but now that I'm on the flip side of it and it's all better, it was huge. You know, it really was things that were really impacting a lot of my day-to-day life. Yeah.
It adds up, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think back to like when I was struggling with the migraines and when I started making the right changes with my hormone health, of course, my primary goal was to get rid of the pain, right? I wanted to get rid of the migraine. And so that started working, but then I noticed all of these other things that started to improve that I really wasn't even paying attention to. right? Like, and so then you're like, whoa, like this really was my root cause. Like this really was, because now I feel like a totally different person. So it sounds like the same for
You
you.
almost don't realize how bad you feel until you get
Yeah.
on the other side, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I was feeling kind
I
of
was,
cruddy.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, like I didn't even realize kind of the darkness that I was in from a mental perspective. I mean,
Mhm.
I thought I was okay, right? Like I was like,
Right.
I'm okay. I'm just in pain. I just have to figure out this pain. And
Right.
then on the flip side, you're like, I was not okay. I was definitely
Right.
not okay. So yeah.
You were
So,
just
okay.
thinking through the day to day, right? You just did what you had
Right.
to get through. Yeah.
Right. So I know that when I had originally made a social media post saying, hey, if I were to run some sort of hormone health, info group or whatever, who would be interested? You were one of the first people to reach out. You joined my beta group, and this was March of 2020. So right at the start of COVID. So tell
Right.
me about like what brought you into the course, what intrigued you, and how did you kind of get started?
I felt like I was at that point, I was turning 40 in 2020. So it was the like, hey, you're about 10 years away probably from menopause. Maybe it was just one of those like, maybe I do need to learn some more about this. Maybe there's something to this. And I'd been watching your posts, of course, and following you for a long time. And it was just that intrigue of maybe just maybe it's not just me, right? Or it is me, but maybe it's not just the mental side of me, and that there's something more going on here, and I need to delve a little deeper, and it's time to learn about this. And I honestly joined it thinking, I feel pretty good. I'm pretty healthy. I feel okay. But it'd be good to learn about it now so that when things start to happen, I'll know what to do. And then the more that I dove into the course and the more that I learned, I really realized, oh, these things I have been feeling are because of this, not just me and not just being a woman who's 40, right? I think that's the age old excuse of, well, you're 40, you're a woman. It's just the way it's going to be. And
Yeah.
so I was able to kind of say, oh, and take the reins with that really early. And, my hope is then by the time I hit 50 and by the time I'm hitting menopause, I'm on top of it. And it's going to feel totally different than what my mom went through or what our grandmas went through, all of that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm so glad you did. So you came in and okay. So I teach in the course, right? The first step of everything is really just tracking your cycle, understanding your body and how it's supposed to feel, as opposed to maybe how you're feeling, and then taking that information to your functional medicine doctor. And so at that point, had you seen a functional medicine doctor before, or what was your experience with doctors, leading up to that point when you told them you felt off?
Yeah, I had no experience with a functional medicine practitioner of any kind. Didn't even really know it was kind of a thing, even being in healthcare, right? But I had an amazing DO. My primary care physician is a DO, and I went to him at the start of the course with the questions. You really equipped us with really great questions, and I just went to him and said, "Here are some things that I've been thinking about, things I've been learning about." And he's a doctor. In the past, we've talked about anything from essential oils to um, different diets, fad diets or not. I mean, he's very on top of a lot of the different alternative medicines, which I really liked about him. And so when I went to him with all these questions, he looked at me and he's like, "But you feel fine. Why do you want to do all this testing?" I was asking him for the testing and wanting to dig deeper into that. And I just basically said, what I want is a baseline. I want to know what I am right now so that if I do this again 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I can see what tanked on me, right? Was it my progesterone? Was it the estrogen? Was it testosterone? Like, what is it that changed in me? And so he kind of was like, well, I mean, okay, if you want to. So thank goodness I kind of had that mentality. And so, we went through all that testing. And when all that came back, he essentially said, okay, I kind of see what you're talking about. Some of these things could use a little bit of help, but I'm not the person to help you with that. So, and mostly, what he said to me, thankfully, was if you were a man, I'd help you through some of these, but I don't want to mess with your hormones being that you're a female. I want to make sure you get where you need to be. So he referred me to an endocrinologist who was local in our community. I go through Community Health Network, and I met with him, who again wanted to just run all the same tests that I'd kind of been through. And so I was like, okay, I mean, if you feel like you have to do it again, but he's talking all through this, and he's talking, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, but I kind of feel like all this stuff's going to come back normal. And when it does, I'm just going to tell you, you need to cut calories. You probably just need to be at 1,300 calories or less, and that's really just the problem. And I basically left there thinking, I already know that's not the problem. I already know enough. Thank you, Jenny. I already know enough to know that's not the problem. And I've already tried all that, right? I've tried the cutting calories. I've tried cutting carbs. I've tried different programs. I've tried all of that. And the weight just keeps coming on. So that's not the problem, right? There's something else going on. And so, I just made it a point to really just ask around, and I had a friend who referred me to another, the ones that you refer to in the course, unfortunately weren't taking new patients at that point. So I found another one who's been just a game changer. And I walked in her office. She's a nurse practitioner, and I sat with her and I kind of explained my journey, and I said, and here's the problem, because it's nothing mind blowing that's happening in my life right now. It's not like I'm suffering from migraines. It's not like I can't get myself out of bed. It's not like I'm not functional. I'm not insanely obese or anything like that, right? So, you kind of, I don't want to feel like a whiner, right? Like I don't want to feel like,
Right.
well, I'm nitpicking all these things. But basically what I said to her was, I want to be able to age well. I want to be able to go into my next 10, 20, 30 years and age well. And she was like, absolutely. And you deserve to. And I was just like, oh my gosh, what? I was like, I could have cried right there in the office. Like, somebody gets it. Somebody, like, you really get it. Like, you're really going to listen to me and we're really going to talk about this. And so it's just,
Yeah.
from there, been totally changed.
Yeah. Isn't it? It's sad really when you think about, like, I say this probably too often, but like, it is a little bit sad to think that, healthcare has become what it's become for a majority of people. It's not to say that I'm not generally speaking here. I mean, I'm not stereotyping, so to speak, but I'm just saying that this comes up a lot. I was just joking with Kristina before we started recording about how anybody listening to this podcast on a regular basis is going to say, is this the same girl I listened to last week or the week? Because these testimonials are all going to sound, there's going to be things that sound repetitive. And this experience of finally feeling heard by a functional wellness practitioner is so common. And I hear it all the time, because I think we get to a point where we just start to accept what our general doctors are telling us, right? We're accepting the fact that, okay, I guess my blood work is in normal ranges. I guess I'm just crazy. I guess maybe I don't feel off. Maybe I'm just feeling really anxious or depressed. Like, we start to really like blame ourselves, because obviously doctors are experts, right? They know a lot about the medical field. However, there is this difference in proactive wellness versus reactive wellness. And so in my experience, and it sounds like in yours too, I kept meeting with spinal specialists and migraine doctors and all kinds of people who were literally just like, well, everything looks normal. Like, your brain looks normal. Your blood work looks normal. Like, we just maybe think it's in your head, right? Basically was what they were telling me.
Right.
And I remember saying, like, well, if I feel this bad, then there's something wrong underneath, right? And it's, to me, it feels like my whole body is connected. So why are we only looking at my brain? I mean, I spent 2 full years of just seeing doctors that were looking at my brain. And so, finally sitting down with a functional wellness doctor, it felt like for the first time, not only was I being heard, but somebody was finally looking at my whole body. They were looking at how my hormones worked with each other. They were looking at vitamin deficiencies. They were looking at my sleep. We were talking about like lifestyle issues that, sadly, for 2.5 years, despite seeing about 14 different doctors, not a single person had asked me up until that point. And so I know the feeling that you had when you literally, I mean, I'm not an emotional person usually, but I felt emotional too. Like, I felt like, oh my gosh, you mean it's okay for me to want to be proactively well? Like, what a concept, right? Like, you want me to go off of these drugs and these medications? Whoa, like, okay, now I feel like I'm finally being heard. So anyways, okay. So you started seeing your functional wellness doctor. You took some materials from the course as far as like what to ask them, what testing to request. You got some testing done with them. I'm assuming, did you do like, I think you did like the Dutch testing and this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had done that previously through my DO. And so I had done the saliva testing and she wanted to rerun everything as far as the blood testing. And so we did everything, all of the vitamins, the minerals, the, enzymes. Like, she did a full CBC. She redid some of the blood hormone levels, all of that. So, at that point I was like, I don't even care. You're like, whatever you want to do, I'll redo it all.
Yeah. So what came back from that initial testing? What did you find?
So really I had a couple of vitamin B, vitamin D that were low, which I had been supplementing. So that was interesting. I obviously wasn't supplementing enough. And my progesterone was almost non-existent. And so that was a big conversation that we had, was my estrogen was right on target, right where it should be, but my progesterone was so low that when you're looking at the ratio, and we discussed what the ratio should be, and I wasn't anywhere close. So,
Yeah.
I was not even like I don't even know. I wasn't even like a percent of what it should have been. So it was really, really low. And then my testosterone actually was, interestingly, was right in the middle of quote unquote normal, right? But it's most of my symptoms, the brain fog, the libido, the irritation, all of that stuff were related to symptoms of low testosterone. So, we had a conversation about that, and she said, your body must just want more. So we did start supplementation for testosterone through pellet injections, and that's been a game changer for me with that. So again, I say, it was just a few things, but tweaking that has been
Yeah. All the difference.
All the difference. Yeah.
Did she put you on a progesterone cream of any kind or anything for that?
You know what? That's actually my next question for her. Is that I started progesterone, but it's in a pill form, and I want to ask her why that versus a cream. So that's the next thing on my list to really have a good discussion with her about, because I still feel like it's really low. I'm still showing some of the signs of low progesterone. So I don't think that's getting me where I need to be. So I want to have a conversation with her about that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question to ask. Yeah, it's interesting because I remember Kristina sharing in the Facebook group some things. I know one thing that's common that she and I both experience is some spotting leading up to the period, right? So having a few days of some light spotting before your full flow starts. And I remember you asking about that, and of course me having a similar experience. I thought, ooh, I wonder if maybe progesterone is at play for you, right? And then sure enough, it was shortly thereafter that your testing came back and you're like, yep, progesterone is low. So, and it's common, right? We talk about this, this concept of like, a lot of times people think that menopause is like it, right? Like, well, I can't be menopausal yet because I'm only 40, right? That's what is in our head. Well, when menopause hits, that's when our estrogen starts to tank. But there's a 10-year period or so before that where our progesterone starts to slowly decline. And what Kristina is referring to is this ratio between estrogen and progesterone. So you can technically have both of those things in the right levels, so to speak. They can quote unquote be normal in the normal ranges, but the ratio between the two is what can really throw people off. It's what can cause people to have, for me, migraine headaches, right? For other people, it could be related to weight gain and not being able to drop the pounds, right? Having that, it's called estrogen dominance. So it's this idea of like the body holding on to fat, usually in the hips and thighs. And it's so darn frustrating. Like, and so I've been in that same position. I fight it every day. I fought it every day for the last 20 years. And so I was so excited for you, honestly, when you got your testing back, because I thought, okay, this is kind of what I was thinking in the back of my head, because you had so many symptoms that were so similar to me. And when you got those results, like, first of all, I know how you feel. When I got my original progesterone results, this was probably, 15 years ago. My progesterone level was, during my luteal phase, was 0.08, which is basically, like you said, non-existent. Like my body was producing none. Right. And so I remember my functional doctor being like, so we need more, like we definitely need more. And that could definitely be the reason for some of your issues. So I felt so excited for you, because I felt like, oh, like this is it. I don't want to say it's an easy fix, but it's an answer. It's an answer. Right. And we know that we can start getting you feeling better. And I love that your doctor's on board with bioidentical, because there's a huge, huge difference between bioidentical therapy versus synthetic therapy, which is something that I also teach in the course. But okay, so you're supplementing, you're going to be asking about the progesterone, you have a follow-up, or you're planning on doing regular testing, I'm guessing, in the near future, you'll be testing again to see how things are changing and shifting in the right direction. But how are you feeling? So how is your energy now? How's your brain fog, the irritability?
Oh my God.
The libido, if you
I feel like you should bring my husband in and ask him that question, because I think, they're the ones who notice the change the best, right? I mean, that was even basically at 4 weeks from starting the testosterone and progesterone, it hit, and she told me it'll be about week 4. And it was literally week 4. And it was just like this weight lifted off of me. I felt my brain was clear. I felt like I said earlier, I would be tired maybe on days I, just stayed up too late or whatever. I'm a night owl like you, Jenny, stay up late. And so I might be tired, but I didn't feel like I was just out of it. So my energy level was there. The brain fog was gone. I didn't feel that irritability towards everything and everyone around me. Definitely the libido, that's a definite ask my husband question, but it was 100% back. And I'm pretty sure he made the comment like, where did my wife go? It's like the one I married is back, So,
Yeah.
uh, so yeah, I mean, it just has been a game changer. And we're still working on getting the progesterone at the level that I need to be. I'm still spotting a little bit, but I mean, I used to spot 5 to 7 days before a period. I mean, half my month when there was bleeding, so that was never fun. And now I'm a couple of days. It's 2 or 3 days leading into it, and so we're getting there, but not
Yeah.
quite where it needs to be. So
Well, it's
yeah,
a journey. It takes time. I always tell people, I know, give it at least 3 or 4 cycles of something like bioidentical therapy before you even start to pay attention to whether there's a difference, right? For me, it took several months. And if you're low, like Kristina and I, it might take even longer, right? So you're on that journey. And this is what this is what I get so excited about, because I think, I'm so glad that you had reached out originally and that you hopped into the course and that you're making this progress, because you thought, right? You've kind of told us your thought process before was, maybe, I'm okay. Like, I'm functional. Like, do I even need to pursue this? Like, I feel bad even complaining. And then now look at where you are, right? And now as a result of it, you're a better wife, you're a better mother, you're a better employee, you're a better, you know what I mean? Like, and this is what it's about. Like, I think as women, we are so quick to put ourselves on the back burner, or to think that other people have bigger problems, like,
Yep.
or, my child needs the focus right now, or that you think something's right. I've heard from a lot of women, actually, they start to think that maybe their marriage is on the rocks because they don't have this libido, they don't have this drive. These things are seemingly small things that really add up in the long run. Like, this really adds up to your quality of life. So, okay. So in the course we teach, right? The first step is obviously tracking your cycle, understanding what's going on for yourself, meeting with that functional doctor, getting the right testing is step number 2.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like you're on your way there, right? You're getting some regularity in your testing, right? So then we really kind of, what I like to say is, we try to put the icing on the cake at that point. So now you're really understanding your cycle, you're supplementing accordingly, you're able to dedicate more energy to maybe exercise, nutrition, and your sleep. So I want to talk about that next. So you can, let's start with sleep. Were you always a good sleeper? Has that changed for you? Has that improved for you? Or have you always just kind of been good to go there?
usually been okay. That's other than staying up late, but I still generally get that 7 to 8 hours of sleep. So it just depends. I think now more of the issue is we got a dog, and the dog wants to be in bed. So it's more of that. The uninterrupted sleep isn't happening as frequently as it used to.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall sleep has not generally been an issue for me, thankfully.
Okay. Yeah. So when we're talking about the 4 fundamentals of hormone balance, it sounds like sleep's not really been an issue. Now you're getting the right supplementation. So what's left in that is your exercise and your nutrition.
Yep.
So in the Sync course, I provide meal plans, right, to take the guesswork out of the equation for you. Or have you been following those meal plans? Do you like the meal plans? Like, what have you noticed when it comes to your nutrition and to cycle syncing your fitness?
Yeah, I will say when we first started, because the biggest thing is, I tend to do, not that I follow that 21-day fix mentality to a T necessarily, but I always enjoyed the container idea, right? Of knowing kind of how many proteins I'd get a day, how many fruits, how many vegetables. And so I remember that being one of the number one things I changed really early on, because of course, waiting for doctor's appointments, especially through COVID, it took me a year and a half before I got to where I needed to be, right? So some of those changes I could make early on, and the big one with what you did with the nutrition plan and increasing the blues, increasing the healthy fats, right? Then I found, and increasing, I think I increased one
Protein.
carb.
Yeah.
Well,
Protein, carb. Yeah. All of it,
yeah.
all of it goes up. So your calories go up in the Sync plan, because we want to make sure that you're not in a state of low energy.
Right.
And we increase your protein and your fat considerably so that you are more satiated and your blood sugar stays stable.
Yeah, and I just remember the basic thing that I did was I just took every meal and I said, okay, I'm going to make sure that I have a protein, a carb, and a healthy fat, and then of course the fruits and veggies throughout the day. And so that was almost an immediate thing that I felt, and it was like, oh my gosh, that it did keep me sustained throughout the day, and I didn't ever feel that blood sugar tank. And so when I maintain those on days, I definitely feel a lot better. And then I can always tell, I'm like, you got to get back on track. Like, you've been skipping breakfast or whatever it might be. Like, can't do that, right? And then so yeah, that was definitely helpful. And I find myself talking about that more than anything with just friends, like, especially my mom, especially, is one who I'm constantly telling her, you don't eat enough. You don't eat enough. You need to make sure that you're getting these proteins, carbs, and healthy fats in your life constantly all day long. And again, because as women, and especially with all the things out there, I think we try to cut those carbs and we want to get rid of them. And I don't think that women really understand the value of carbs. So
yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I just, by the time your podcast launches, people will have already heard the episode, and I can link back to the show to it in the show notes. I did a podcast episode, a solo round on the keto diet and intermittent fasting and these different trends that are happening and whether or not they're conducive for women. And I think this diet culture that is ever changing, right? When I was a kid, it was low fat, and then it became now, low sugar, which as a result became things like artificial sweeteners instead of real sugar. And then now it's moved into low carb and high fat, high protein, which has been really misconveyed into like a cheeseburger with bacon, right? Like, I don't know how far we've come a long ways, but never in the right direction, right? It seems like we're always willing to cut a macronutrient. And in reality, women need all three, men do too, right? And so I was thinking about this yesterday. Two things that came to my mind. One is, I have two daughters. One is 1 and one is 5. And I can notice when they might have a more sugary breakfast, like if they have a little maple syrup with their protein pancakes, I can start to see like a couple hours later, I can see the energy levels like start to whoop, they're petering out. Right.
Yep.
And so as opposed to maybe like an egg scramble or something that's a really higher protein thing. And so, but what's interesting is, you would never say to your child, like when their energy is crashing, you would never say like, well, sweetie, maybe we should just cut back on some carbs for you. Or maybe we should, restrict your calories. Like, no, you give them something to eat, right? And something that is higher fat and higher protein is going to satiate them. It's going to keep them happier longer. It's going to keep them from the tantrum and the meltdown. Obviously, fueling kids is another thing that I'm super passionate about, but somehow as grown women, we're like, maybe I should stop eating carbs. Maybe I should, maybe I'll feel better. Yeah. Maybe I'll feel better if I cut back. Like, okay. So that's the first thing I thought of. And secondly, I have a dear friend of mine. We were just texting back and forth a couple of days ago, and she was like, okay, help. She had seen a post that I made on social media about my progress with upping my protein and cycle syncing. And she was like, okay, I need help. She's like, I feel like I veered off track. Remind me how to get back on. It's like she knew how to be on, but she needed reminded. Right. And so I was like, are you eating enough? And so she shared with me her journaling that she did. And I was like, you're like 400 or 500 calories under, sister. Like, you are way under. So we made some adjustments, and I gave her some tips, right? She was having carbs late in the evening. And I said, no, let's front load your carbs earlier in the day. Let's make sure you're getting more protein in each meal. So instead of like 3 or 4 ounces of protein, making sure you're getting more upwards of 4 to 6 ounces of protein at each meal. And she's been doing this now for 2 days. And I've been getting text messages from her that's like, oh my gosh, like I don't feel exhausted in the evening now. I don't feel like I'm starving before bed. Right. Like, and why do we put ourselves through it? Why don't, it's one of those things where you're like, I know better. Like, I know that when I eat more, I feel better. And also for women listening who are training women. Now, listen, I do not mean that you are a marathon trainer. I do not mean that you are, some sort of crazy exercise enthusiast. I just mean if you are training 30 minutes a day, if you are exercising, or if you have small children, which is also considered an exercise. My phone keeps dinging. We have an Oura ring, and it keeps telling me like, you should log a workout. And I'm like, no, I just cleaned up the house. Like, that's what I just did. That was my workout. So anyways, if you have small children or you're exercising or both, you definitely need that fuel. Right? Like, so anyways, I digress, but I just wanted to mention that because I think it's so common that we think to ourselves, gosh, I feel really low energy. Maybe I should cut back. And in reality, it's like, no, you might need more food.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Okay. So it sounds to me like you've really come full circle in the last couple of years. You're making a lot of progress on this. We didn't touch much on the workouts. I do want to talk about that. Did you notice, when you started to kind of fall into the rhythms of your cycle and the energies of your cycle with your workouts, did you notice that? Were you like, oh my gosh, this definitely makes sense. This workout matches my energy today?
Yes, absolutely. And especially, the days 1 and 2 of your cycle where you take that break, when you feel the most depleted, right? And it was all of those lessons that you teach, and you think through, I do feel at my strongest today, or I do feel at my highest energy today, or I feel at my lowest energy. It was just like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. I feel like I'm capable of doing that workout today. Whereas if you had asked me to do that on my day 1 or 2 cycle. There's no way that, and again, those are those moments, like that's when women give up on a program, right? You're like, oh, just must not be the one for me. I must not be able to do it. Like, no, where are you in your cycle? And maybe it doesn't match where you are. And yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's, I was just thinking this the other day. I was doing a workout and I thought, I came out of the workout thinking, ugh, like I was so exhausted. And I was like, I love this style workout. Like, why do I feel so bad? And I popped out my sync scope and I dabbed my saliva on there. And I was like, I don't think I'd be ovulating. And sure enough, I was approaching ovulation. And I'm like, that's why I felt sluggish, you know?
Yeah.
And so things just start to naturally make sense. I'm so glad that you've seen such benefit from this. What would you say have been the biggest things that have stood out to you as far as learning, things that you didn't know before that you've been able to? Obviously, we've talked about a lot, but what have been the biggest things for you?
A lot of the supplementation, I think, I definitely increased a lot of the things that I was supplementing morning and night. My husband jokes, I have a morning and AM PM pill organizer now, and he just laughs at me about it. But that supplementation was key. And then kind of like we just talked about with the nutrition, the increasing of the protein, the carb, and the fat, and even just increasing calories overall. I think as a woman who grew up in the 80s, that was just the big thing, right? Everything was low calorie, cut calories, be low. And so getting through that shift in your brain about, no, it's really about the healthy eating and what we're eating, and not necessarily worrying about being under 1,300 calories or whatever. Those couple of things I think were really the biggest changes I kind of had to make mentally. Yeah. And then just the shit, getting the testing done and having somebody who's, you like, again, feeling heard, even allowing my husband to realize I'd been telling him, listen, it's me, not you. But it doesn't feel that way. Right. So for him to see that shift in me and go, oh, I guess you were right. Like, you weren't just feeding me a line this whole time. Right. So that's all been just game changers, really.
Yeah. And I love when husbands are on board. I love when husbands so my husband's probably listening to this. He edits all of my podcasts. So he's been learning a lot, not just through the podcast, but also just with my struggles in the last 15 years. And he also knows how real this is. Right. And so when you're married to someone who is struggling, when you are the spouse of a woman who is off and foggy and not the best version of herself, right? Like sometimes other people see it before you even see it. And so it's always cool to hear men speak up and say, like, whoa, like, yes, my wife is back, right? Like this is who I thought I knew. Okay, awesome. So if for the woman listening to this, who's thinking, gosh, I hear myself in Kristina's story, what would you say to them?
Oh man, I think the biggest thing is, I think the OT in me thinks about the mental health, but I think, the first piece of advice is just stop beating yourself up, stop blaming yourself, stop making yourself feel like there's something that you're not doing or that you're not good enough. And then really, it's take the time. Don't give up on things too soon. I had a friend just say to me the other day, how's it going with all that? Oh my gosh, how do you still not have all that figured out? How do you have that patience? And I was like, you know what? Normally I may not have, but because I see it working, I'm willing to take this 6 months, 12 months, however long I need to figure out where I need to be. So take that time, give yourself the time. It really is important to be able to take that time for you and figure it out, because you will feel like such a different person on the other side that you won't even, you'll look back and go, how did I ever make it that long feeling that bad and not even realize I felt that bad? So.
Yeah. Well, I know that one thing that we touched on early before we hit the record button was, something that I think holds a lot of women back, which is, how much is this going to cost me, or how long is this going to take? Right. And what would you say to that person who says, oh, what about cost, or what about the journey itself?
I think I've said this to a few friends too. Like, I understand the privilege that I have to be able to pay for this. The person that am with, it happens to be out of pocket. It's not something through my insurance. However, when I met with that endocrinologist and used my insurance, I still, between that visit and the testing that he did, spent about $300. And then I walked into a functional medicine nurse practitioner's office and spent about $300, and actually had good testing, had someone who listened to me, and had good results by the end of it. So, I think it was, obviously, to me, money very well spent, and continues to be money very well spent. So, it's one of those things that, use your HSA funds if you need to, if you can find a functional medicine practitioner in your network, even better. But it's definitely, there's a value there to feeling heard, because I do think when we put that trust in doctors and then they tell us one thing, even though we know and we've been learning enough about it and we know that that's not necessarily the right answer, you still take that and put that internally a little bit. So you need to really get with the right person. It's definitely worth the time and the money and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can't help but think, like, what money are you saving in the long run by, because you used the phrase aging well, right? Your goal from the beginning of this was, how can I age well? And this is how you age well, right? You learn about your body, you find somebody who's in your corner, you're proactive about your wellness. And that way you're not, 55 and miserable and dumping your money into modern medicine and pharmaceuticals and treatments of symptoms as opposed to root cause. So I like to tell women, yes, I mean, there are different variations, right? I've heard there are functional medicine practitioners in your network. There are some that are a little bit a mix of both modern medicine and functional wellness, which is what my doctor is. And then there are some that are out of pocket, but in doing your research and asking, I find a lot of women will say, oh, I didn't realize that it was going to be only $100 to consult with the doctor, right? Like sometimes it's a little bit surprising that it's not as expensive as you think, as opposed to a doctor that does get run through your insurance. And then they put you on prescriptions or, extra testing that you have to pay for out of pocket. That's really unnecessary. And it still doesn't get to the root cause. So so I'll link back in the show notes to an episode we did on finding a functional medicine practitioner. If you have not listened to that, make sure you take some time to listen to that. It is totally worth your energy to do so, as you can even hear from Kristina's story. So, okay, as we wrap up today, Kristina, thank you so much for taking the time to be on this podcast and for sharing your story. I know there's a woman listening who's thinking, she sounds like me and I need to do something. I need to finally do something. So for them, I am grateful for you. And I'm so glad that you've been a founding course member and somebody who's been a strong advocate for the Sync course. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you. It's been really, really great the last couple of years.
Awesome. Have a great day, my friend. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. You too, Jenny.